Some of the things, the reasons to use native plants, and water is probably one of the most prominent. Golf courses, lawns, parks use an incredible amount of water. And as we see Florida being developed rapidly, the water issue is going to be forefront in all our minds. Native plants use a lot less water. Native plants survive with minimal use of fertilizers and pesticides. All those beautiful green lawns you drive by in your neighborhood, most of them are sprayed with an incredible amount of pesticides and heavy amounts of fertilizer. These pesticides are a deterrent to the many pollinators and butterflies that we are trying to attract to our yards. Native plants can require less maintenance. Exotics tend to grow rapidly. As I'll talk about later, right plant, right place. If you put a plant that only grows 2 to 3 feet high, you're never going to have to trim it. Lawns, blowers, things like that use a lot of gas. They make a lot of noise. You can get by with a lot less if you use native plants. Native plants create a sense of place. Plants from other countries, other areas of the world, sometimes just don't fit in our Florida landscape. The picture on the left, you see muley grass, beautyberry, gumbo limbo tree, Everglades palm, all adapted to here, and it just makes you feel like you're in Florida. A sense of place. And of course, the benefit of attracting wildlife. The beauty of the butterflies, the different birds that we get. It's easy to do just by using native plants. So let's talk about gardening for birds a little bit. What birds need. Food, obviously, is the most obvious. And many of our native plants produce an abundance of berries. From our beautiful beautyberry, bird pepper, or grove pepper they call it, firebush, velvet leaf coffee, marlberry, and Virginia creeper, which is a vine, but it's a primary food source for many migratory birds. I've seen all the woodpeckers we have here commonly. I've seen summer tanagers, lots of different birds that use the beautyberry, the Virginia creeper. Nectar, which is primarily for your hummingbirds, when you're talking about birds, but a few of these plants are very good for your hummingbirds. And I'll talk about specifically some of these plants later. Seeds and grains. So many people are fastidious and they'll tend to take out their plants as soon as they're finished blooming. But you leave the seed pods and a lot of birds will use these seeds as a food source. The picture on the right, those are spent narrow-leaf sunflower, which are in bloom in the center picture there. We leave these for the goldfinches. We were ready to cut them down one day and we saw lots of goldfinches all hanging on the dead seed pods. Cardinals will use tropical sage seeds as a food source. So when they get to a point where you can't stand anymore, go ahead and cut them down, but leave them for a while. A lot of the dead blooms are very attractive. And of course, insects. Using pesticides, you get rid of all these little moths and all these little caterpillars, but they're really a primary food source for many, many migratory birds. And whenever we spray, we're getting rid of all these little caterpillars, little inchworms, numerous tiny, tiny moths, but all those little moths you see are laying tiny little caterpillars up in the oak trees and all your other big trees and shrubs. So if you don't spray, allow these little moths to survive, that's what you see the little birds eating up in the trees. They're eating these little tiny caterpillars. So let them be. And of course, water. Water is easy to provide in your home garden. Bird baths, obviously. Small little water features. You can actually even just lay down plastic and create it like a small little wetland area right in your yard. You can put a little flowing stream in with a little pump. You can get a dripper, which is in the top photo there with the bluebird bath. A little dripping water attracts birds. Simple bird bath, even a dish of a shallow bowl works very well. And it is important to keep them clean them out periodically, but it's important to provide water for your birds. And of course, shelter. Dead trees, brush piles, native trees, as far as the branches and everything, are definitely important. I talked about the brush piles. Small area in your yard, out of the way where your neighbors might not see it, because they can get kind of messy looking, but a lot of Carolina wrens will use them. The finches will use them. Like I said, they use them for cover. They use them for nesting. We have box turtles around here. You could put it in an area where you can put a small fence around it so that people can't see it. Leaf litter is important. A lot of our moths and butterflies, the Luna moth actually nests larval. The caterpillar is actually larvals in the leaf litter in the ground. Fireflies, the larval stage is in the ground. So when you're raking up all the leaves, you're raking up a lot of the insects and butterflies that are soon to be. Snags and cavities are easy to do. A lot of people cut down their dead trees, but you can leave a dead stump in your yard, say maybe 8 to 10 feet, that's not going to fall in your house. It's not going to fall in your car or into your neighbor's yard, but it'll provide lots of benefits for birds, squirrels, bats, owls, as you can see. It doesn't take much. They make great perches. They attract insects, which is going to attract birds. And if you have it in the right spot, it's not going to be harmful. When you cut out all the dead wood, you're eliminating a lot of habitat for a lot of wildlife. Of course, you can install nest boxes, which definitely work. Bluebird boxes are the most popular. Great crested flycatchers are a common bird that we have here in the summertime. They'll use nest boxes. I've seen tufted titmice use boxes. I've even seen the red-bellied woodpeckers use some of these boxes. So it's easy to use. You can find nest boxes online just about any place. But if you don't have the dead trees in your neighborhood, provide some kind of nesting like boxes. So I'll talk specifically now about a few plants. These are, of course, beautyberry and wild coffee, two of our most common shrubs that we use that are great for providing berries for birds. And I'll talk a little bit too about each plant, where it can be used in the landscape. Walters viburnum is a shrub. There are some cultivars that stay very low. The regular Walters viburnum can get up to about 12 to 15 feet. So it's good for a backdrop, screening, a hedge, or even for a specimen as a small tree. White flowers in the spring, the fruits turn green, and then they go to red, and then they finally turn kind of a blue-black. So you get a really nice seasoned color out of this. Marlberries, one of my favorite. More for South Florida. As you get into North Florida, north of Tampa, it doesn't do so well because of the cold. It'll take quite a bit of shade and also full sun. White, fragrant flowers twice a year. They're starting to bloom right now, very fragrant. As you can see, the fruit is a favorite of many birds, and it's edible too. They're not super flavorful, but they won't hurt you if you eat them yourself. Of course, beautyberry is a favorite of many landscapers. It's used quite a bit. This shrub grows all the way up into Ohio. It's a bird favorite. Catbirds, mockingbirds, blue jays Very useful shrub. It can get up to about 8 feet, but as I'll talk about a little bit of maintenance later, any shrub that gets too big, don't be afraid to cut it back very hard if you need to. Sometimes we'll cut them back almost to the ground and it'll come back up and you can maintain it at a height you like. Wild coffee comes in 4 different flavors, actually. You can have your Bahama coffee, which grows to about 5 feet. The regular wild coffee, which is shown, gets up to about 7 or 8 feet. There's a satin leaf coffee, which is the middle photo. Some people call it soft coffee. It gets up to about 5 feet. And there's a dwarf wild coffee that only gets up to about 3 feet. They all produce these beautiful red berries that birds love. Great for a foundation planting or somewhat as a screen planting along a hedge line. Firebush, another one of my favorites. Any butterfly garden or bird garden needs to have a firebush in it. Flowers profusely 9 to 10 months of the year. The flowers attract hummingbirds, all the butterflies that we have in Florida. And when it goes to fruit, it's another favorite for a lot of our migratory birds. And you can see those nice juicy fruits that are very appealing to lots of birds. Simpson stopper, very versatile shrub, even a small tree. It can grow to 30 feet, but typically in our area, we'll only get to about 25 feet. It can be used as a hedge, sheared with shears if you want to do a little maintenance on it, or loose like it is in the picture, more of a loose kind of a hedge. White fragrant flowers, beautiful red berries, very versatile shrub. Elderberry, everybody's probably heard of elderberry wine. The Sambucus nigra, beautiful small black fruit, beautiful white flowers, good for wet areas. This plant does like it a little more wet, full sun to partial shade, gets up to about 12 feet or so. But there again, if it's too big, cut it back very hard, let it come back. Coral bean, another spring blooming shrub. One drawback is this is a little thorny, but it is beautiful red flowers early in the spring before the leaves come out on the plant. So the flowers are very striking. The seeds are very red, very attractive, and a lot of hummingbirds and butterflies will use this in the springtime. Wax myrtle, another very good one. The berries were a source of for the bayberry candles. They're very aromatic, very waxy. A lot of our warblers use these tiny berries, very high in protein. So a lot of our migratory birds will feed on the wax myrtle shrub. The leaves are very aromatic. It can be grown as a small tree or as a hedge again. You do want to, if you're trying to attract birds, these plants are dioecious, meaning 2 houses. Dioecious and monoecious. Monoecious meaning 1 house, dioecious meaning 2 houses. So with 2 houses, you have the male and female plants. The males will flower, but you won't get any fruit. The females will get the fruit. It's sometimes hard to tell when you're buying the plant when they're young. You don't know if they're male or female yet because they're not old enough to produce the fruit. So sometimes it's tricky, but usually there's multiple plants in one plant if you buy it. So chances are you'll get a female in that pot. Your hollies, Dahoon and Yopon holly. And we have a few others, American holly, a few different cultivars. These are great for the berries. Again, these are dioecious plants. So you have the male and female. So only the females are going to get the berries. The flowers are small, somewhat inconspicuous, but the fruits are very, very showy this time of year and a favorite of many of our birds. So this is a small tree that likes it somewhat moist, but will adapt to drier conditions. Our native tree, the sable palm, state tree of Florida. Beautiful palm, definitely gives you a sense of place. As you can see in the right-hand corner, it produces lots of fruit, another favorite of lots of birds, very high in protein. The flowers are fairly fragrant when they're blooming. Lots of pollinators will use the flowers. Very adaptable. Of course, live oak, very iconic Florida with the Spanish moss. Gets to be a large tree. You definitely need some room for it. But this probably provides more food just by the fact of the amount of insects it attracts than any other plant. You get the inchworms, you get tiny little moths, like I said earlier, little caterpillars that are up in that tree that we can't even see, but all these little migratory birds and all the birds that come through will utilize the tree to find those little caterpillars. And a lot of birds nest in the cavities left by old branches, like the owl there. And of course the acorns, lots of squirrels for that. Those are the little flowers in the middle there. Florida privets, another really good one. There again, another dioecious plant, male and female. You can see the fruits, and these fruit very early in the year. Usually in March, you'll get the fruit. And many of the birds that spend their winters in South America, as they come across the Gulf and they land on our beaches, this is more of a coastal plant, but they utilize all these berries to replenish their reserves that they've used to fly all the way across the Gulf of Mexico. They need to replenish. And if we have a landscape full of non-native plants that don't have fruit, and all these birds are coming across and they have nowhere to land and nothing to eat, and they're not going to last long. So it's important to provide plants like this in your landscape that can provide food for the hungry birds and critters out there. This is an underutilized shrub, sparkleberry, grows all the way into South Florida. It's one of our vacciniums. The difference with this one is it flowers in the spring, but it fruits more in the fall. So the fruits are ripening right now, and they're not as juicy as a regular blueberry, but they're very sweet, a little dry, but very sweet. The bark of these plants, the sparkleberry, is beautiful. It kind of exfoliates, kind of is reddish, very attractive in the landscape, and those beautiful flowers in the spring. Winged sumac. This is not a poisonous sumac. There's only one variety of sumac that's poisonous, which does grow in some of our northern states. So if you see sumac here, it's not a poisonous variety. I like the sumac. It suckers a little, but it has a beautiful red fall color. The seed pods, you can make a tea out of it. If you steep it in hot water, it makes a very nice tea. When the seeds ripen up, it's another great food source for many birds. So that's the winged sumac. And of course, sweet bay magnolia, our namesake. We have many large sweet bay magnolias growing on the property here where the nursery is located, hence the name. And you can see the beautiful flower, the red seed pods that form this time of year. Many birds like to use these. Very attractive tree, evergreen foliage. It's also a host plant for your tiger swallowtail butterfly. Necklace pod, a large shrub, yellow flowers. You get the small seeds on there, look like kind of a necklace there, hence the name. I've seen this plant used as a foundation planting where it's kept at about 3 to 4 feet tall, and it stays very dense and full down there. The picture you see on the right, it's more of its natural habit, and it does grow up to about 8 feet or so. Just a little few vines here. As I mentioned, the Virginia creeper, the blueberries are really beautiful and a very valuable food source for many plants. Many people are afraid of vines because they can take over, but if you leave a few of these, the Virginia creeper tends to hide itself in oak trees, and it doesn't get really too aggressive. And you will get the beautiful blue fruits. And when we get a little hint of cooler weather, the leaves will start turning red, and you really get a nice show of red fall color as we head into our winter months. The corky stem passion, nice big blue-black juicy fruits. A lot of cardinals use them, the mockingbirds, catbirds. Of course, our coral honeysuckle, the flower there on the top right, you can see is beautiful. And then of course the fruit itself too is nice and red, very good for attracting birds. So just some gardening techniques. Like we said before, just to refresh: food, water, shelter, just what wildlife needs. Plant a variety, mix things up a little bit. If you plant all the same thing, it's kind of a monoculture. It's important to provide a variety in there, so you always have something blooming in your yard. When one thing's not blooming, something else will be. If you keep plants together, it kind of provides more shelter. You want to try to get rid of some of the open spaces in there. And there again, things that bloom at different times of the year, so you always have something of interest in your yard. A small water source, like I said, could be something as simple as a small dish that you keep filled in your water. It doesn't have to be a big bird bath or an elaborate pond. And kind of cater to their life cycles. There's something usually going on, the butterflies, the caterpillars. You want to make sure you're not like cutting your milkweed back in the middle of the summer when you'd be eliminating all the food for your caterpillars. You want to leave the milkweed grow, so you kind of got to make sure you're in sync with the life cycles of the particular butterfly or birds you're trying to attract. And of course, eliminate the use of pesticides. So we'll talk a little bit about butterflies here. Let's see. And inviting, there I said I talked about their life cycles. Butterflies are more prolific, definitely, in our summer months, but we do see them here all year long. So you want to kind of cater to their needs. This is a picture of a black swallowtail, which likes some of our parsley and the water dropwort, which is a native plant. Looks similar. The flowers look similar to parsley, but as you can see, they have the 4 life cycles, and then you need the flowers, and you need the plant for the caterpillars to feed on. So you just need to make sure you plant enough of everything. You want to have the flowers for the adults to nectar on, but you also want to have the host plant for your caterpillars to be on, and that's where the eggs are going to be. And the chrysalis are typically on a different plant than the host plant. Usually the caterpillar will crawl off and crawl onto some other plant that's close by. So that's why it's important to kind of cater to their needs, and you have a different plant or something else close by to the host plant, because the caterpillar typically crawls to a different plant to go into its chrysalis. So this is a picture of our office with some dotted horsemint, which is a great late summer into winter bloomer, and it's great for attracting lots of butterflies and wasps and a lot of insects. These are some of the host plants I'll talk about. That's a picture of a sulfur butterfly caterpillar. Of course, milkweeds, that's usually what gets people hooked first into butterfly gardening. Everybody loves the monarch butterfly, and milkweed is the primary host plant for that. But also the queen and the soldier will use it. And some people don't realize that they also use this plant called a twine vine. It's a very fast-growing vine. It has the milkweed flowers, very fragrant when it's in bloom, which is right now. Takes wet areas, but it's also a host for your monarch and queen and soldier butterflies. White twine vine. Your passion vines for the Gulf flitterary and your zebra longwing. If the plant is grown in the full sun, the Gulf flitterary caterpillar up in the right will tend to use it. When your passion vine is grown more in the shade, your zebra longwing, or zebra heliconia, some people call it, will use it. So if it's more in the shade, you'll get more zebra longwings. More in the sun, you're going to get more of your Gulf flitterary. The flowers on the corky stem are only about a half an inch big, so very small. So you're really not growing it for the flowers. You're really growing it for the butterflies. The maypop passion vine, large flowers, 2 inches across, somewhat fragrant, and you get the large fruits on there. The maypop tends to be, it's a perennial, but it does tend to die back in the wintertime. The corky stem is more of an evergreen, so it'll stay green all through the year. So those are your passion vines. Your sennas, privet and Bahama, also known as cassias, but now they're kind of going back to calling them sennas. So you have your privet senna and your Bahama senna. Privet senna, bright yellow flowers, tends to grow more upright. Your Bahama senna tends to be more shrubby. Both evergreen perennials, flowers more in the wintertime, makes a nice foundation or a standalone specimen. The privet will take quite a bit of shade and flower, and the benefit is it flowers through the winter, and you will get lots of, as you can see down the left, lots of those yellow caterpillars. They do tend to like the flowers a little bit when they to eat, but once they eat their fill, go into their chrysalis, you'll get more flowers come in. So those are your sennas. To attract your giant swallowtails, the Hercules Club. Now remember, these are all host plants. So these are what the adults are going to search out to lay their eggs on. So these plants will get eaten up. But as we say here, if something's not eating your landscape's not part of the ecosystem. So it's good to have your plants eaten a little while, and it keeps them pruned down a little bit too. So your Hercules Club and wild lime, they're both a little thorny, but both attractive shrubs or specimen trees in your landscape. And you can see that caterpillar looks like bird poop, you know, one of its defense mechanisms. This is our largest butterfly in Florida. Very large. You see the giant swallowtail. You know you've got some wild lime or Hercules Club nearby. Our spice bush. We grow the spice bush. We're pretty much at our southern limit of the spice bush and the sassafras, but we do get this butterfly commonly found in our area here. And you can see that beautiful little spice bush swallowtail. It's always exciting when we find a new caterpillar in the nursery, and we know we're going to get some butterflies soon. So sassafras, both these like a little bit of shade. The spice bush likes more shade, but it will do well in our area here. And I talked about the sweet bay magnolia, and there's the eastern tiger swallowtail on the right. A couple of other ones that use it. The spice bush will also use the sweet bay magnolia, as well as the Palamedes swallowtail, which is another large swallowtail butterfly. And our red bay. The red bays have been decimated by a fungal disease carried by a little psyllid. The psyllid's an insect that flies to the tree. It feeds on the tree. And when it's feeding on the tree, it injects this fungal pathogen into the red bay tree, and it's killing many of the red bays in our area, unfortunately. But I do see a lot of new ones growing up. It doesn't seem to affect the young trees as much. Some of the older trees do seem to be resistant to it. So I would say keep planting the red bay. It's a very attractive evergreen tree, and you will get lots of these butterflies coming around with the red bay in your yard. I mentioned the wax myrtle. as a shrub for the birds, but it's also a host plant for the red-banded hair streak. These hair streaks are small butterflies, maybe only an inch or so, but once you start getting into butterflies, you start looking at new varieties to attract. And it's a really cool little, the hair streaks are really beautiful little butterflies. They actually move their wings so that their backside of the wing looks like the front. And they're, again, a cool little defense mechanism. So both the winged sumac and the wax myrtle are host plants. And your live oak, there again, I talked about the benefits of all the insects that it attracts, but here are just some of the more common butterflies that use it actually as a host plant. So they will lay their eggs of these, and the tiny little caterpillars are eating the leaves of the oak tree, which doesn't really damage the tree. You don't really see the damage on a big tree, but the birds will be able to find the caterpillars, and we'll get some butterflies out of it. Your water dropwort, as I mentioned, for the black swallowtail, it's a fairly large butterfly. There are a couple other ones that aren't in production yet. The water hemlock, which is a poisonous plant, but it's another host plant for your black swallowtail, as well as parsley and dill, which you can find in many different local stores. It's also a host plant for your black swallowtail. That's the chrysalis there on the left. Beautiful, beautiful caterpillars, beautiful butterfly. The capers, Jamaican caper and limber caper, for your great southern whites. Beautiful flowers. Jamaican caper can be a shrub, evergreen shrub, or a small tree. Limber caper is more of a smaller shrub. As the limber caper actually flowers at night. Those flowers open up late in the evening and then last through the nights. They're mainly pollinated by moths, but the great southern white uses it as its host plant. And this is a ground cover, the frog fruit, common buckeye, and the white peacock. The white peacock especially is a very common butterfly in our area. Mid-sized butterfly, very attractive. Common buckeye is a beautiful little butterfly, not quite as common, but they will both use the frog fruit, which is, the frog fruit is a great ground cover, can be mowed. It can be aggressive a little bit, but it's very easy to maintain. Beautiful little flowers, beautiful evergreen plant. We get caterpillars on it all the time here. The twin flower is becoming used quite commonly now. It's a nice little evergreen ground cover, full sun to full shade, wet to fairly dry, and it's a host plant for both these butterflies again. You can see the caterpillar of the common buckeye there in the middle. Beautiful little butterflies. Our pawpaws. Pawpaws are a little harder to come by in the trade. There's people that are starting to grow more, but they take a long time to germinate, a long time to get going. We do have a lot of the Asimina reticulata, the netted pawpaw they call it, in our area, but it's not really available yet in the trade. But this is the plant the zebra swallowtail uses. So we do have the Asimina triloba is more common. You can find that in many nurseries, and it is pretty adaptable to our area here. So here's some nectar plants. Of course, anything blooming is going to be a nectar plant. Anything with the flowers, all the butterflies will use any kind of nectar, anything they can find. But these are some of our favorites here. The dotted horsemint, you can see it's a short-lived perennial. It will reseed readily. Purple to pale purple flowers. It can spread very easily, but you get all kinds of pollinators on the dotted horsemint. The snow square stem or salt and pepper, There's a couple varieties of this. One's more of a dwarf variety, stays fairly low, and then there's another variety that'll get up to about 2 to 3 feet. But you get these little white flowers that have the little black specks in them, hence the salt and pepper. Really good nectar plant for many of the different butterflies. The snow square stem. Firebush, I mentioned, it's just a magnet for all the butterflies. You get the giant swallowtails, you get the tiger swallowtails, black swallowtails, the zebra longwing, the Gulf literaries. Sometimes I've seen up to 5 different giant swallowtails at one time on one firebush. It's a definite must for any butterfly garden. And of course, hummingbirds, which we get a lot of hummingbirds here. There's not as prolific as some of the other states. You just kind of have to have your eye out for them because they don't congregate like we see them in other places. So, but we do have lots of the ruby-throated hummingbirds here. Tropical sage is a short-lived perennial. It can get up to 3 feet, full sun to partial shade. It's a good bedding plant. It can reseed and get a little crazy maybe, but there again, just clean it out. Lots of red flowers, lots of butterflies will use this, and lots of hummingbirds. And there's a white and a pink variety of this also, but the red's the best for attracting butterflies. I mentioned our wild coffee. Great for as a nectar when it's in bloom. You see the white flowers over there, and then it turns to the red berries later on. But when it's in flower, a lot of butterflies will utilize it. Some are the lantanas. The button sage has these tiny little pink flowers, but it blooms all year long. It's a small shrub up to about 4 feet, likes it very dry. It says it's evergreen. And then you have your pineland lantana, which has nice yellow flowers, blooms most of the year. It gets up to about 3 feet or so. Beautiful yellow flowers. They're again great nectar plants. The lantana. The porterweed, another good ground cover. It will reseed readily. Somewhat cold sensitive, so there again, if you're in some of the northern areas north of Tampa a little bit, it could burn back a little bit, but it most likely would come back from seed pretty easily. Flowers most of the year, little tiny purple flowers on the end, but they're again a great nectar source for many of our butterflies. The tick seeds, all the coreopsis. The two that we use mostly are on the left, you have the true tick seed, or the Coreopsis leavenworthii. That's the common tick seed. And it is more of an annual, but it will reseed readily. Then the picture on the right, that's your lance leaf Coreopsis, or the Coreopsis lanceolata. And it blooms off and on all through the year. And it tends to be more of an evergreen, probably a short-lived perennial, 2 to 5 years or so for the one main plant. Like I said, usually you'll drop seed and you'll get new plants coming up nearby it. One more Coreopsis. There is a Florida Coreopsis. It's not shown, but it's a fall bloomer, and it's a kind of a succulent plant. It's a perennial. Blooms in the fall, likes kind of moist. It's another good Coreopsis. So any of your Coreopsis are great nectar plants. The button bush, or Cephalanthus, it's a common plant all the way up into, there again, Ohio, New York. Likes it fairly wet, full sun to shade, prolific flowers when it's blooming in the summertime. Lots of butterflies will utilize it. But you have to have it in the right area. It's not going to do well if you put it in a dry area. I'll talk about that in a minute. Right plant, right place. So the Cephalanthus likes it more wet. Blanket flower likes it more dry. It tends to be a annual or a biannual, meaning it'll go a couple years, blooms for an extended period of time. And eventually the plant kind of starts looking a little ratty, dries up a little bit. And typically we just pull the whole plant out or cut it back very hard, and you'll have lots of little seedlings underneath that'll replace the original plant. Beautiful showy flowers, the blanket flower or gaillardia. Goldenrods, some people like to stay away from them because they feel they cause hay fever, whatever, but the studies I've read, they say it's actually other trees that are blooming at the same time as the goldenrod, and they really feel the goldenrod has gotten a bad rap for causing hay fever. Beautiful yellow flowers, lots of bees, butterflies, and everything use them, and it's just a beautiful sign of fall. So they can be fairly prolific once they go to seed. They can spread a little bit, but it's a great plant to use in your landscape. And there's quite a few varieties. You have your seaside goldenrod, which gets quite large. There's a pine barren goldenrod. There's your Chapman's goldenrod. There's a Juan goldenrod. Those are just a few of the many species of goldenrod that we have here in Florida. So the list can go on and on. We have quite a few plants to choose from, obviously. So this is just a few more. Your silkgrass likes to dry. It's more of a fall bloomer. Your sunshine mimosa is being used quite a bit now as a sod replacement. It's good low growing ground cover. Fairly adaptable, so dry to wet. Your black-eyed Susan, a nice little perennial. We'll take it fairly dry. I've seen on roadsides right up against the road where it's just almost shell, so it'll take very poor soil and do well. Your green eyes, little more delicate, dry conditions, blooms more in the spring. Going down to your blazing star, and with that tiger swallowtail on it, blooms in the fall. Beautiful showing now. If you haven't been out to any of your natural areas, there's many in our local area here to get out right now. Mayaca State Park, Lake Manatee State Park, Little Manatee River State Park, Oscar Share. The Laetris is in full bloom right now. Scorpion tail, a nice evergreen perennial, a great one for nectaring. The cone flowers does marginally well in our area, but it isn't evergreen perennial. The flowers die back in the winter. It'll send up new shoots and new growth in the spring. And our ironweed, another midsummer to late summer, fall bloomer. A couple of varieties of ironweed. The giant ironweed can get up to 6 feet tall. The smaller narrowleaf ironweed gets up to about 3 to 4 feet, but great for nectaring. Calumet, another good fall bloomer, evergreen shrub. Button snake root, good for a wet area. Very cool flowers. It's one of the orangiums, which we have a few varieties of orangiums around. The cluster vine, another vine. Starry rosin's a great perennial. And sea lavender is more of a coastal plant, but when it flowers, it's a great plant for attracting your queen butterflies. Stokes aster, another great perennial. Evergreen, moist areas will take full sun to partial shade. Spiderwort, good for the shade. Beautiful blue flowers more in the morning. And then your blue-eyed grass, it's a summer bloomer, more for a moist area, but it's a good grassy plant for a low ground cover. So how best to use native plants? To start summing things up here. I mentioned right plant, right place. So you know your site. If it's wet, is it dry? Is it sun or is it shade? You want to pick a plant that's going to be adapted to that. You don't want a plant that likes it wet in a dry area because it's never going to do well. Just because it's native doesn't mean it's going to thrive. You want to have it, if it likes it wet, you want to get a plant that's going to be in a wet area. Same with sun or shade. You don't want to put a plant that likes shade out in the sun. It's never going to do well. And then your objective, are you trying to create a foundation planting? Are you trying to do screening? Are you putting in a butterfly garden? What's your objective? So you want to start there. Do a proper layout and planting. Just sketch something out on a piece of paper. Very simple to do. Draw your house. Put a circle around the area you want to do, and kind of go from there. Usually, the tree is going to be a dominant aspect of any landscape. So I usually say start with where your tree is going to go, and then where are your large shrubs going to go, like on your property line for screening. And then start working in towards your house. As you get closer to your house, you want to do mainly lower perennials or flowering things, or your butterfly garden that's going to be close to your house, and then have your taller shrubs and a tree away from the house for screening and to give you privacy. Any new plantings require watering to get them established. Until they get new roots out, they can't maintain themselves, but once they have those roots out, they're able to maintain themselves. So, and they do require occasional care, periodic trimming, cleaning, to keep them looking tidy. Most HOAs sometimes frown on native plants, but as long as they're maintained properly and you just don't let them get wild and keep them neat looking, they shouldn't complain. So some websites you can go to for some other good information. Of course, the Florida Native Plant Society, Florida Association of Native Nurseries, Audubon Society. You can click on there. They'll tell you what plants to use for certain areas of the country. National Wildlife Foundation. Natives for Your Neighborhood is really good. You can put in your zip code, and they'll give you a list of plants that are suitable for your area. The Florida Wildflower Foundation's a great foundation. Lots of great information on that website there. And of course, the North American Butterfly Association, NABA. These are some good books. Some of our favorite here. This one by Doug Tallamy. He's been in the news a lot lately, Bringing Nature Home. This was his first book, and then Nature's Best Hope is his more recent book. Another great speaker, Craig Hugel, for Florida Wildlife, Landscaping for Florida Wildlife. That's a great book. He's a great speaker too, if you've ever had the opportunity to hear him. This Landscaping for Florida's Wildlife. It's an older book, but it's very simple to use. A lot of good information in it, as well as all these other books here. So lots of information to use. So that's it. I think we're right at about 45 minutes, and it's been a pleasure presenting this. I'm sure you probably have lots of questions. And if we don't get to all the questions today, I think you're welcome to email us at either Sweet Bay Nursery, sweetbaynursery.com, or you can contact the Osprey Trail Junction, and we can get the questions answered for you. So now I am going to turn the program over to Pam.
Yeah. Hi there, Tom.
Some questions. Hi, Pam.
Yeah, nice presentation. And I always learn more and more from you. And there's so much information. It's so hard to put it all into 45 minutes, I know. So one of the most questions asked is, of course, where can we access this presentation after today? And OJT is putting it on YouTube. We are recording it, so it will be presented on YouTube, and you can access that through our website, ojtfriends.com, and you can access the YouTube presentation. And also, they want to know where your nursery is located. So just to say, it's off Erie Road in Parrish. And like Tom said, you can access their website at sweetbaynurseries.com, or email Tom directly at sweetbaynurseries@gmail.com. And one of the questions was, do you offer design and consultation services? And I'll answer that for you, where I know you used to do that, and you no longer offer those services, but I do. So if anyone wants to contact me, you can also contact me through Sweet Bay Nursery.
We do offer, if people come in with a small plant or anything, we'll be happy to do on-site visits here at the nursery, and we can pretty much answer most of their questions here. But Pam's been helping with design too, and she's very qualified to come out to your house.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you do come to the nursery, bring photos, bring a design plan, try to kind of understand your environment, the environment you're looking for, so that you can tell the people who work there, because like Tom said, everybody is real knowledgeable and will help you right on site to determine what plants might be good for you. So definitely do that. And okay, so starting with number one, to treat the bird bath water for mosquitoes that won't hurt the birds, is there something they can put in their bird bath water?
I think just a drop of even cooking oil, olive oil. If you get a coating of oil across the top a little bit, I think it keeps it too. But I recommend just cleaning the bird bath out every 2 to 3 days. Just take a hose and wash all the old water out, and then any mosquito larvae that are in that will it'll be clean water every day. So that's really the best way to do it.
Interesting. And to keep and these are from anonymous attendees, to keep a fire bush dense, what would you recommend?
Trimming it back. They do get leggy. One fire bush I've had in the ground for probably 10 years. Every 2 years, I cut it literally to the ground. And in 1 year, it'll grow back bushy and full. So as I mentioned, cutting things back hard, maintenance can be an issue, but you don't want to cut it so much right now, because as we get into our shorter days in wintertime, things aren't going to recover as quickly. But really up until just a few weeks ago, and even probably now, as warm as it is, you can cut things back fairly hard and you will get substantial growth. So cutting back things hard, things will grow back. We're just in that climate.
Yep. And Alan wants to know if we have, we being Sweet Bay, do we offer wax myrtles in multi-plant pots? He's never seen them in multi-plant pots.
My point on that was, when most growers sow a wax myrtle plant, they'll put like 5 seeds in there, so you'll get a fuller plant that's more marketable. So what I'm saying is, you have like 5 individual plants in there. And basically, it's multi-stem. So typically, 1 or 2 of those is going to be a female, and the rest will be male. Rarely do you get all male. So most likely, that's what I meant by a multi-plant. So it's really just the same size pot. There's just multiple plants in that pot.
Okay.
Hopefully that's clear.
Okay. And another anonymous has a maypop and a non-native passion vine, and the butterflies obviously use both of them, but is there a danger of crossbreeding?
Not to my knowledge. We do carry the edible passion vine, which is Passiflora edulis, I believe, the Latin name. And it's very attractive to the butterflies. Use it, and it's I don't believe they hybridize naturally. It would not be a problem for your birds or butterflies to have both of them.
Oh, good. And Karen just wanted us to know that she replaced her front yard with twin flower, and she has seen her first Buckeye butterfly. So that's cool.
Great.
Yeah. Loretta wants to know the best time of year to cut back the Bahama Senna so it gets bushier.
You could still, we've trimmed some just recently in the nursery, so right now, but there again, they're starting to put on flower buds right now. So if you trim it too hard right now, you're going to sacrifice some of the blooms. So I would really, really anytime through the spring, summer, up until really the end of October, the middle of October. So we're almost at the point where you don't want to cut it back too hard right now.
And can you keep a pawpaw as a shrub?
The reticulata, which I meant the netted pawpaw, you can keep it as a shrub, but they tend to be more of a small tree almost. But there again, if you trim it down, you can keep it to a smaller size. Yes, you could keep it more as a shrub.
Susan is wanting to plant some wetland in some wetland areas along the stormwater ponds. Is there anything you can recommend for that?
Some of the duck potato or arrowhead, those are both Sagittarius. They're both good for a wetland area. The pickerel weed, purple flower, is a good one. One of the host plants that I mentioned for the black swallowtail, the water dropwort, is a good one. Yellow canna lily, which is a canna lily, they call it bandana of the Everglades is a common name. It has a yellow flower, beautiful, showy yellow flower. That's a good one for a wet area. And our blue flag iris, which blooms in the spring, that's another good one for a wet area. Some of the grasses like that. So we do have an area of just wetland plants. Some of the eryngiums I mentioned, the button snake root, they will take it pretty wet. So those are some good ones that stay fairly small. There's some other ones. The alligator flag gets quite large. It's good for a wet area. Some of your reeds, bull reed is a good one, gets pretty tall, but that's a good one also. So there's quite a few to choose from for a wetland area.
Another anonymous is looking to grow a hedge with a wild lime, but is not real happy about the thorns. Is there another plant you can recommend?
For the giant swallowtails, well, the Hercules Club has, it's more tree-like, not as shrub-like. But yes, the wild lime, the one drawback is it does have quite a few thorns on it. So they will use citrus trees, but the difficulty with citrus trees is they have to be usually sprayed for other pests. So it kind of defeats the purpose of using those for a host plant for your giant swallowtail. Because if you're going to spray the tree for your other pests, you're most likely going to kill any caterpillars that are on the tree.
Yeah.
So you could use like a key lime or a Myers lemon. Possibly those are two more resistant non-native citrus that do well against the greening. That's such a problem with the citrus industry right now. So the wild lime, there again, it's another plant. I had one that got too big. I cut it off right at the ground. It was probably 6-inch diameter trunk. And within about 2 weeks, it had sprouted, and now it's very easy to maintain as a low-growing shrub. So when they get too big, my recommendation is just to cut it off at the ground, let it kind of bush out, and it's a lot easier to maintain when they're new growth, and you can just kind of clip it with a head shears or your hand shears and keep it as a small shrub.
Miriam wants to know, what is the best time to sow wildflower seeds?
Pretty much in the spring, when we have some moisture. You want to, when you sow seeds, I would say early in the spring, meaning February. And then you want to give them a little bit of water, because if you just sow them dry, they're not going to sprout so much. You want to give them a little bit of moisture once you sow them, but primarily springtime is the best time.
Okay. Karen says, is there a small flowering tree other than magnolia that would be available for northern Florida?
A flowering tree. Let's see, your crabapple possibly could work. Flowering dogwood, redbud, fringe tree. which is a Cheonanthus, but the fringe tree would be a good one. Crabapple, like I said, redbud, flowering dogwood, and then the sparkleberry, which I mentioned. That will grow into a small tree.
Mhm.
Those 5 there are all good choices.
Mhm. Lisa wants to know in Martin County, a nursery recommendation for Martin County.
There used to be one, Martin County Growers, I believe. If you go to, which I have up on the screen now, the Florida Association of Native Nurseries,
Mhm.
and you can look by counties, I believe, or different areas of Florida, and they'll list the different nurseries that are in that particular area. Or go to the Florida Native Plant Society website, and you can, they have all the different nurseries broken down by the different counties.
Okay. Heather is having trouble with grass growing, suffocating or growing into her gardens, and wants to know, she pulls it by hand, but wants to know, is there a ground cover that she can put to suffocate the non-native grass?
That's a great question, because grass, any ground cover can be problematic with weeds intruding into it. And I can't say, in all fairness, that there's any that would smother the grass completely. It's very, you almost have to, I think, have a tolerance of having a little bit of weeds in your ground cover. You pull out the ones that are most obvious, and you reach a point where you're going to have a nice ground cover of, say, the Lakeside Twin Flower that gets very dense, but you will probably have a few weeds in there that, if you just trim them down, you don't really perceive the weeds being there. I mean, we might know they're there, but if you're driving by and seeing the garden or looking at it, you might not see that they're there. So keep hand pulling, try and eliminate as many as you can. If you see grass is going to seed, just pull the seeds heads off immediately so that the grasses don't reseed, and eventually they tend to get less and less as your ground cover gets denser and denser.
And a couple of people are concerned about something eating their eggs and caterpillars, and what can they do about them?
Wasps are the primary predators on caterpillars, and typically when there's just too many caterpillars, the wasp population tends to go up. And there again is not a lot you can do about the wasp. I mean, if you do have wasp, I mean, they're good pollinators also, and they typically aren't going to sting you unless you kind of get in their face, so to speak, or get into their house. But if you have paper wasp, in the eave of your house, you can knock the nest down. In the evening, you can go take a rag and go up to the nest and kind of grab the whole nest, because they're all there with the rag, and you get them all in that rag. Or we try not to use a spray, but if you try to squelch your wasp populations, you might have more caterpillars. But I guess just try to have more host plants so you have more caterpillars to kind of outnumber the wasp, because you are going to get wasp predation, and even some of our little lizards are going to eat some of the caterpillars.
Yeah, isn't it also true that the nesting birds, well, the birds will use the caterpillars as food for their baby birds?
Some of them, yes. Some of them will get eaten by caterpillars. Some of them, like the swallowtails, a lot of them don't taste well, so it's a defense mechanism of the caterpillars. But a lot of birds will. So there again, just plant more host plants so we have more butterflies, so that there's enough food for everybody.
Right. Is it okay in November to plant coffee or viburnum or mimosa?
I would plant them in November. We really would plant all year long, really. So you might not get as much vegetative growth as if you plant something in the fall or winter months, but the roots will continue to grow, and come spring, the plant will be better established to withstand our dry period, which is typically in April and May. So yeah, I would say really plant anytime. Now's a good time.
Yeah. Okay, and one more. Loretta wants to know the best time to prune anise, or both yellow and red.
There again, it goes back to, you could trim it now, you're just not going to get as much vegetative growth. So really the best time, if you're going to prune something very hard, the best time would be late spring or anytime up until August, really, to cut something back very hard. As we get more into September, October, I wouldn't cut things back quite as hard, just because you're not going to get as much vegetative growth coming on later in the year like this. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, there is one from Eric, wants to know if the Geiger tree does well in Sarasota.
Geiger tree will do well in Sarasota. Manatee County is probably its northern limit. Well, actually, it'll grow up into St. Pete and maybe even some areas of Tampa that are close to the water. But it will do well in the Sarasota area, the orange Geiger.
Okay. Fantastic. Is Rebecca still on with us here?
Hi, I am still here. We have one more question, I think, from Carrie. Do you have time for one more question, Tom?
Sure.
She says she only seems to see wasps around her horse mint. Is that normal? She does see bees and butterflies around the rest of her garden, so she knows they're around.
They will be around the horse mint. It's, for some reason, the horse mint tends to attract some very different, unusual wasps, that the only time I ever see those particular wasps are when the horse mint is blooming. And most of those wasps are solitary. They nest in the ground. I didn't mention that in my presentation, but we have many nesting, many bees and wasps do nest in the ground. So it is important, talk about raking up your leaves and the other things that do use the ground. It's important to leave some areas of dirt exposed for some of our ground nesting pollinators. But the horse mint, it does attract a lot of wasps for some reason, and they aren't the stinging kind, so I wouldn't worry about that. But you will get a lot of bees and other butterflies that utilize the horse mint, not just the wasp.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your expertise and your talent.
Sure. Well, I appreciate everybody tuning in, zooming in. And like I said, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to email either Pam at ojtfriends.com or sweetbaynursery@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Well, let's give one more virtual round of applause to both Tom and Pam. I'm sure if you could hear the applause, it would be resounding. We're all on our feet clapping for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Becca.
Again, that's Pamela Callender and Tom Heitzman, our main performer. Thank you so much for providing such an informative session. And thank you to all of you who logged on today. We so appreciate your support. Many of you asked if there will be a recording available. There is a recording available if you go to the Friends website. That is ojtfriends.com. The Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead Park continues its webinar series a week from today with a workshop on bicycling safety called Smart Cycling 101. You won't want to miss it. The session is 1 hour and it's slated for, mark your calendars, Wednesday, October 21st at 11 a.m. Visit www.ojtfriends.com/webinars for more information and to register. Thanks again. My name is Rebecca Tasetano. I'm representing the Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead Park. We hope that you had a wonderful time and we hope that you have a great day. We'll see you next time.